Hi, my name is ATTY Frekhtman. I'm a personal injury trial lawyer here in New York City. And today I'm going to tell you how you can easily obtain the most compensation possible in your car accident case. How can you do that? Well, there's a few different things that you have to look at. Number one are what I call medicals, or your medical care and seeing the right doctors. That's really, really important. A lot of people get into a car crash, but they don't even go to the doctor, and they think they're entitled to compensation just by the mere fact that two cars collided. That's not true, especially in New York, where you have to prove a serious injury, and there are 9 different categories. So to really obtain the most money you can, either by settlement or jury verdict in your case, what you have to do is get the right kind of care. And usually after a car crash, a patient injures their back. So they could start off with a herniated disc. And that just means that a disc right here, this is the disc, the little jelly, that it explodes and it starts leaking and touching the nerve root back here. And if it's not completely leaking, if it's just kind of like bulging out, that's called a bulging disc. And if it is completely exploded, that's called a protrusion or a herniated disc. And you could see that here, the red part, that's the herniation right there. So a lot of clients after a car crash have these herniations, and it just depends what the client decides to do and what the doctor thinks is medically needed. If the client decides not to do anything and just get 3 months of treatment, we could settle the case, but usually it's going to be anywhere from $5,000 on the low end to maybe, 30, maybe on a good day, depending on other factors, maybe 50,000, the highest you're going to get. But usually on average, it's 10 or 15,000 because you're just getting that conservative care. Now, if a doctor thinks you need it and you're having pain and symptoms and you end up getting a pain management procedure, such as an epidural steroid injection, the doctor goes in and he puts medicine in here so that you don't feel the pain anymore. You still have the herniation, but you don't feel it as much because of the medicine of the epidural steroid injection. So that, getting 3 epidural steroid injections, usually it's a series of 3, can make the case value go up anywhere from like 25,000, 30,000, all the way up to maybe even over 100,000. We had a truck accident case where we settled for 140,000, and the only injury that the client had, he had a herniated disc and he had 3 epidural steroid injections and nothing else. And in that case, we got $140,000, which is a pretty high amount. So the next thing, if the epidurals don't work, is there are other procedures. There's radio frequency ablation. There are percutaneous discectomies, where a doctor will go in with a striker decompressor and he'll decompress the disc, and it'll actually suction out disc material, and then the disc will become like a perfect circle, like you see up here, a perfect jelly circle, and the nerve roots are back here, so it's not touching the nerve root, and then this injury, this red part, just disappears. That's usually done either in a hospital, in a surgery center. It takes not too long. I think it takes like 20 minutes to 30 minutes. It's minimally invasive. It's done with a fluoroscopy. So the doctor could see everything. He sees the nerve roots, he sees the disc, he sees the vertebrae or the bone. So it's very safe. So there's no chance of anything going wrong. And we've had a lot of clients do what we call colloquially as perc discs or percutaneous discectomy procedures. It's called a discectomy because part of the disc is being removed. And those cases usually go for, I would say, again, it depends on how much insurance is available, but anywhere I would say from a low of like 80,000 if the case has a lot of problems to a high of over 500,000. We had a jury verdict in Manhattan for 547,000 on one percutaneous discectomy. We had one in Brooklyn for 350,000, and we've had a lot of settlements for 200,000, 275,000, and the like. So that's what you could get for the perc disc. Now, if the perc disc doesn't help and you need even more treatment, or some people just skip the perc disc altogether, whatever the doctor thinks is best for you, What they do is they have a full-blown discectomy or laminectomy, or they have a fusion surgery. And a spinal fusion, either to the cervical spine or to the lumbar spine, usually those cases will command anywhere from $500,000, and that's if the case has significant problems or just not enough insurance, all the way up to, there have been verdicts for 10 million and more for spinal fusions. We had one truck accident spinal fusion in the Bronx that we settled at a mediation for $2.4 million, almost $2.5 million. We had another one with a construction accident in Queens that we settled for 2.8 million, almost 3 million. And then we've had a lot, just before the pandemic, we had 2 trials, both with spinal fusions. One after, I believe one settled during trial after one of the witnesses testified for 1.4 million, and the other one also settled for like 1.45 million, and that was after closing arguments. When the jury was deliberating, the judge wanted to effectuate a settlement. And so usually those will go for over $1 million as long as the coverage is there. And those are the typical injuries. Now, of course, some people don't injure their back in car accidents. Some people injure their knee or their shoulder and they need arthroscopic surgery. Those cases usually go for, I would say, 100,000 and up. It really depends, again, on the coverage. If you have enough coverage, they could be much higher. We had a case with just an arthroscopic knee surgery, but there was a recommendation for a total knee replacement in a medical note. There was no total knee replacement surgery done, just a recommendation for it. And that case settled for $650,000 after we picked a jury in Brooklyn, and that had $1 million in coverage. So that was a very good result. That's a very high number for just an arthroscopic knee surgery. So that's usually like what you can do. So going back to the issue we're discussing, how you can easily obtain the maximum or the most money possible in your car crash case. So number one is your treatment, right? Your medicals. Number two is, I think that the client has to be able to tell their story. Because if you look at the pattern jury instructions and what the jury will be allowing for, or some people say awarding. I don't like the word award because they're not really awarding you money. They're allowing for compensation because you have suffered due to someone else's negligence. So the amount that they will allow for, and they will get certain categories like line items. They will say past pain and suffering, put in a number. Future pain and suffering, put in a number. Now, a lot of that is determined by the medical records and your injuries. But what jurors also care about, because they're just people, right? People, you could be called for jury duty, anybody could be. So they're not going to really like peruse medical records and look at, charts and graphs and surgeries. They might not even understand it. What they really care about is, how did this injury affect your life? How did this injury change your life? And that is what's known as, could be pain and suffering. But there's also another line where they will say, what is the value for past? It's called the
loss of enjoyment of life.
It's your human story. It's your human story. Like, how has it affected you? How has it impacted your quality of life? So that is so important. And it's called loss of enjoyment of life, because everyone has the right to enjoy life, right? In our Constitution, we have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, if you are crippled by a truck that hits you in the rear, you can't enjoy your life. You don't have liberty to go around wherever you want, and you can't pursue your happiness because you've been crippled by this crash. So the loss of enjoyment of life, what we do, and this is also a checklist for what you should do, what your lawyer should be doing, right? This is kind of like a checklist to make sure that your lawyer, if you have a case, is doing a good job, right? Number one, we talked about medicals. Is the lawyer like following up? Are they doing further treatment consultations? Are they sending you to specialists to be evaluated? If you're having pain and they're not, right? If they're just letting you stay with a chiropractor, then that's a red flag. That's a real problem. Because first of all, you're not going to get better. And second of all, your case is not going to be worth much. right? You have to see those specialists like a pain management anesthesiologist or a neurosurgeon to do the spinal fusion if you need it, right? And so that's something the lawyer has to do. Number two is the story, right? The loss of enjoyment of life. Now, to really be compelling here, the lawyer has to interview you. He has to come to your house. He has to do a Zoom call during the pandemic and speak to you and go through your childhood. What are your passions? What do you really love? Who you love, your family, your friends, what you love, your activities. And then he has to interview your friends, right? He has to interview your neighbors, your friends, your circle of friends. And then they have to be able to then come to court and tell a story of who you were before this crash, like a vibrant person with a lot of vitality, who was working, who was exercising, who had a really bright future, and then who you are after this crash. Perhaps somebody who now is confined to their bed, confined to their home, has mobility issues. And then you tell that through these independent witnesses, because of course you can say it, you're the client, right? The patient can say it, the client can say it, but it's much better when you get it from independent third-party witnesses, like a dry cleaner, a neighbor, a coworker at work. And then you just put these people on during trial, and some of these witnesses could be on the stand for literally like 45 seconds, a minute. They could just be answering one question, and you get them off the stand. But the fact that they're there, this jury, when they're listening to this trial, once they hear that, they're not going to think that you're like a fraudster or that you're making this up, right? Because that's going to be the number one defense that the defendant is going to promulgate, that you're some kind of fraudster, that you're not really hurt, that you're malingering, and it's just going to kill that because you have this community of witnesses. So is the lawyer doing that? Is the lawyer interviewing you? Is the lawyer interviewing witnesses? And if they're not, that's another checklist, right? That's another like red flag. So that's something we always do on all our serious cases. And the third way that you could really improve your case and get the most money easily is to be authentic, right? To be brutally honest with yourself, with your lawyer, and with the jury at trial, and with the defense lawyer when you're giving your deposition. Just be brutally honest with everyone. Don't try to cover things up, right? Don't lie and say, oh, I didn't have a prior accident if you know you did, or I didn't have a prior criminal conviction if you know you did. And it's better not to argue with the lawyer, especially at trial, especially during cross-examination. Because one of the things that we see often is, like, for example, you'll be in a trial and the defense lawyer for the insurance company will be cross-examining you, the injured client. And he'll ask something like, you went home after the crash. You could have gone to the hospital, but you went home after the crash. And, and some clients will start arguing and they'll say, well, yeah, I went home because my car was totaled and I didn't know what to do, and the police, and then, and then I went to the hospital 4 hours later. But he'll just say, well, that's not what I asked you. The only thing I asked you was, you went home after the crash. And then you'll start arguing again with him. And then when the jury hears that, it really hurts your credibility, because they see you as a witness arguing with the defense lawyer, and they're thinking, like, why are you arguing? You must have something to hide. And then it just looks really, really bad. Like, I was just in a seminar out in Big Sky, Montana with Trial by Human, who are excellent trial lawyers. They've gotten verdicts of like 50 million and 100 million, crazy numbers. And this is one of the things they said, and they actually demonstrated it. And they said, the best way to handle that is if the defense lawyer says, you went home after this crash. I did. That's it. You're done. And the defense lawyer doesn't have any more questions. That's the beauty of it, right? And then your lawyer on redirect will say, well, what happened when you went home? Oh, I started feeling pain an hour later and I went to the hospital, and everything is, dipped in the bud. And now you have a stronger case than you would have had you been arguing. So I think, like, those are the three things, right? If you really want to easily win your case and get the most, either at trial or in a settlement, make sure you see the right doctors, get the medical care. Number two, be able to tell your story, your loss of enjoyment of life. How has this crash impacted your life? Almost show two roads, right? The road you would have taken had this crash not happened, and the road you are taking because of this crash. And do that with independent witnesses. And number three, be authentic, be brutally honest. If you have problems with your case, tell them. Don't try to win your case in deposition or a trial. Be honest, be credible, tell your problems, be human, be vulnerable. And jurors really like that. And don't be afraid of shame or guilt. Just, let it all out there. And that'll be better for your case. So I hope this has been helpful. Let us know if you have any specific questions or if you would like a consultation. We would be happy to provide one free of charge. And please like and subscribe so we can provide more valuable content to you. And in the comments below, we would love if you would let us know what videos you would want to see. And we'll be happy to record some for you. Okay, have a great day and enjoy the weekend. Bye-bye.